Hello. Paul was an apostle, although not one of the 12 apostles who taught the gospel of Christ to the first century world. Paul is generally considered one of the most important figures of the apostolic age, and from the mid-30s to the mid-50s AD, he founded several Christian communities in Asia Minor and Europe. He took advantage of his status as both a Jew and a Roman citizen to minister to both Jews and Roman audiences. According to the New Testament book Acts of the Apostles, often simply called Acts, Paul persecuted some of the early disciples of Jesus, possibly Hellenized diaspora Jews in the area of Jerusalem prior to his conversion. In the narrative of Acts, Paul was traveling on the road from Jerusalem to Damascus on a mission to arrest them and bring them back to Jerusalem. When the resurrected Jesus appeared to him in a great light, he was struck blind, but after 3 days his sight was restored by Ananias of Damascus. And Paul began to preach that Jesus of Nazareth is the Jewish Messiah and the Son of God. Approximately half of the books of Acts deals with Paul's life and works. 13 of the 27 books in the New Testament have traditionally been attributed to Paul. 7 of the Pauline epistles are undisputed by scholars as being authentic, with varying degrees of argument about the remainder. Pauline authorship of the epistles to the Hebrews is not asserted in the epistle itself, and was already doubted in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. It was almost unquestionably accepted from the 5th to the 16th centuries that Paul was the author of Hebrews, but that view is now almost universally rejected by scholars. The other 6 are believed by some scholars to have come from followers writing in his name, using material from Paul's surviving letters and letters written by him that no longer survive. Other scholars argue that the idea of a pseudonymous author for the disputed epistles raises many problems. Today, Paul's epistles continue to be vital roots of the theology, worship, and pastoral life in the Latin Protestant traditions of the West, as well as the Eastern Catholic and Orthodox traditions of the East. Paul's influence on Christian thought and practice has been characterized as being as profound as it is pervasive. Among that of many other epistles and missionaries involved in the spread of the Christian faith. Martin Luther's interpretation of Paul's writings influenced Luther's doctrine of sola fide. The main source for information about Paul's life in the material found in his epistles and in Acts. However, the epistles contain little information about Paul's pre-conversion past. The book of Acts recounts more information, but leaves several parts of Paul's life out of his narrative, much as his probable but undocumented execution in Rome. Some scholars believe Acts also contradicts Paul's epistles on multiple accounts, in particular concerning the frequency of Paul's visits to the church in Jerusalem. The two main sources of information by which we have access to the early segments of Paul's career are the Bible books of Acts and the autobiographical elements of Paul's letters to the early church communities. Paul was likely born between the years of 5 BC and 5 AD. The book of Acts indicates that Paul was a Roman citizen by birth, but Helman Koester takes issue with the evidence presented by the text. He was from a devout Jewish family in the city of Tarsus, one of the largest trade centers on the Mediterranean coast. It had been in existence several hundred years prior to his birth. It was renowned for its university. During the time of Alexander the Great, who died in 323 BC, Tarsus was the most influential city in Asia Minor. Paul referred to himself as being of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as touching the law, a Pharisee. The Bible reveals little about Paul's family. Paul's nephew, his sister's son, is mentioned in Acts 23:16. Acts also quotes Paul referring to his father by saying he. Paul was a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Acts 23:6. In Romans 16:7, he states that his relatives Andronicus and Junia were Christians before he and were prominent among the apostles. The family had a history of religious piety. 2 Timothy 1:3. Apparently, the family lineage had been very attached to Pharisaic traditions and observations for generations. Acts states that he was in the tent-making profession. This was to become an initial connection with Priscilla and Aquila, with whom he would partner in tent-making. Acts 18:3, and later become very important tent teammates as fellow missionaries.